The following is presented by the Cheeky Bastards.
Brace for impact, buckeroos, because your skulls are about to take a gargantuan blast of action-packed jackassery to the fucking ear holes. An audio explosion so mind-numbing extreme protective headwear should be mandatory to listen to this level of inane horseshit. So lock and load, buttercups, and prepare your tiny minds for your monthly assault of grade A action movie mayhem, filled with enough high-octane carnage, insane shootouts, and nose-busting fisticuffs that Michael Bay himself would weep like the little product placement bitch that he is. Now duck and cover my little cupcakes because it's time for the Men of Action podcast, a show packed with enough testosterone-filled bravado it can take down a small nation. So here are your hosts, those cheeky bastards themselves. From America, it's the notorious Scott K, and from England, it's the cynical Mr. Smith. They may be C-grade meat, but you can bet your ass they're packing some serious fucking heat. Shit's about to get explosive.
Heidi-ho, you slack-jawed sons of bitches, and welcome to the Men of Action podcast. I'm the notorious Scott K.
And my name is Mr. Smith, and this is not my office.
And we will be your cheeky, cantankerous, opinionated host on this monthly action-filled quest as we pit two kick-ass action movie sequels against one another in a no-holds-barred battle to the death to not only see which one truly reigns supreme, but if either is actually worthy of being a fucking sequel in the first place. On tap for you this month is an Eddie Murphy buddy cop sequel showdown as 1987's Beverly Hills Cop 2 squares off against 1990's Another 48 Hours. But before Steve leads an illegal investigation into a criminal organization that's not in his department's jurisdiction or even its state, and I try not to get killed by some racist, well-groomed bikers, it is my pleasure to welcome in my cheeky co-host, Mr. Steve Smith. Mr. Smith, we are in some of your favorite action genre territories this month. We are balls deep in some buddy cop action shenanigans. So we have a double dose of one of the kings of the genre, Mr. Eddie fucking Murphy over here.
Get the fuck out of here. Ladies and gentlemen, Scott is dying.
Yeah, I'm
Coughing
definitely
his
dying.
guts up.
Holy shit.
He's got AIDS, but good AIDS. It's going to be okay.
Yeah, I've got American AIDS. Don't worry about it. It's exceptional AIDS. The best AIDS. That's what we're told. We've got the best AIDS. We've got the best AIDS.
So, yeah.
Yeah, we got some
Here we are.
Another 48 Hours in the Beverly Hills Cops. We got two of his most recognizable characters in the beginning of his career. Really what launches Mr. Murphy from television and stand-up comedy fame into a completely different stratosphere where he becomes a global sensation because of these two films. Well, these two characters, maybe not necessarily these two films.
No, certainly not. And to us in the UK, Eddie Murphy at the time, he was just the movie star. A lot of us didn't know about the Saturday Night Live and all that stuff.
Yeah, and then he had these two huge, also basically comedy movies where comedy stand-up specials with Raw and
Delirious.
And Delirious, yeah. And those were huge.
I'm pretty sure over here that Delirious dropped kind of the same time as Beverly Hills Cop for us on home video. Okay. So that blew our minds a little bit.
Yeah, I bet.
But the Saturday Night Live stuff, not a lot of us would have been aware of, as that show didn't air over here. And much, we've discussed this before with Dan Aykroyd, Steve Martin, all these, all
you
these
guys
guys
got them after
we got them in movies, and then it was apparent, all the TV stuff was apparent much later. So yes, Mr. Murphy over here.
Over here, he was the king in the 80s for sure. Maybe tipped off a little bit. Maybe some Pluto Nash didn't help a lot. But anyway, we can go.
No, but anyone?
Oh, God. All right, well, it is time for us to light the fucking fires and kick the tires on our main event.
And now the moment you've all been waiting for, our Eddie Murphy sequel showdown main event. In the red corner is the 1987 buddy cop action comedy Beverly Hills Cop 2. And in the blue corner is the 1990 buddy cop action comedy Another 48 Hours. So get ready for a no-holds-barred head-to-head collision of two Eddie Murphy buddy cop sequel stalwarts. Two movies enter, only one movie leaves. It's time for the Men of Action movie face-off.
Let's get ready to rumble!
This season, we have been taking a look at some of the numbers behind each of the franchises we discussed. And up first this month is the Beverly Hills Cop franchise. To date, the BHC, as we know it here on the pod, has 4 installments. Beverly Hills Cop was created by Danielle Petrie Jr. and Danilo Bach. Beverly Hills Cop came out in 1984. The sequel that we'll talk about today came out in 1987. Beverly Hills Cop 3 in 1994. And then they waited 30 years to last summer to bring out Beverly Hills Cop Axel F. in 2024. Now, also in June of 2024, Eddie Murphy and Jerry Bruckheimer revealed that a fifth BHC film was already in development. So hold on to your fucking Axel Foley's, folks. We might get another one soon. In 2013, CBS ordered a pilot for a spin-off TV series that would have followed Axel's son Aaron. But by mid-year, the network passed on the idea, so that died before it became a fart. Now, the franchise has been nominated for 2 Academy Awards, a BAFTA, 3 Golden Globes, and nominated for 3 Golden Raspberry Awards, of which it did win 1. That would be from Beverly Hills Cop 2. It won the Golden Raspberry for Worst Original Song for George Michael's I Want Your Sex.
That's a banger.
I don't know. Well, apparently people that were Golden Raspberries aren't getting sex, so that's why they didn't like it.
Fucking losers.
Losers. Now, this franchise had 4 directors, to include Tony Scott and John Landis, as well as 4 different writers. The 4 Beverly Hills Cops films to date have been made on a total budget of $240 million, with a worldwide box office of $735.5 million. The Beverly Hills Cop is the highest-grossing film of the franchise so far, with a $316.3 million at the box office, and it also holds the highest IMDb rating with a 7.4. Up next is the 48 Hours franchise, but look at 2 movies will make it a franchise. Fine. To date, the 48 Hours franchise has 2 installments. There was a rumored third that would have been called Yet Another 48 Hours, but it never materialized past the rumor stage. 48 Hours was created by Roger Spotswood, Walter Hill, Larry Gross, and Stephen E. D'Souza. 48 Hours came out in 1982, with another 48 Hours coming out in 1990. Now, this franchise is often credited with being the first film to pioneer the buddy cop genre. Eddie Murphy made his film debut in the original 48 Hours back in 1982. In 2017, the Safdie brothers announced they'd helm a remake of the film with Gerard Carmichael in the Murphy role. However, in 2019, they announced that they had reworked the script into a separate original idea. That idea has yet to be produced. There is, however, a Hindi-language Indian remake called Andar Bahar that came out in 1984, as well as a Kannada-language remake called Police File that was released in 1992 for all you fans of remakes from foreign soils. Mr. Eddie Murphy was nominated for a Golden Globe for his performance in 48 Hours. This franchise has had a singular director in Walter Hill, and the 2 48 Hours movies to date have been made on a total budget of $62 million, with a worldwide box office of $231.9 million. Another 48 Hours is the highest grossing film in the franchise with $153.5 million at the box office, while 48 Hours holds the highest IMDb rating with a 6.9. And there's your facts and your fucking figures, you pieces of shit. Oh. So we're going to start this fucking Duke down here, this little Eddie Murphy slap around, this little cock slap fest over here with the red corner from 1987. We've got Beverly Hills Cop 2.
It's time for the tale of the tape. Beverly Hills Cop 2 was released in 1987, written by Larry Ferguson and Warren Scarron, and directed by Tony Scott. Starring Eddie Murphy, Judge Reinhold, John Ashton, Ronnie Cox, Brigitte Nielsen, Jürgen Prochnow, Alan Garfield, and Paul Reiser. It was made on a budget of $27 million and grossed $300 million at the box office. It holds a 6.6 rating on IMDb with a 49 critics and 58 audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. On Letterboxd, Steve gives it 2 stars, while Scott also gives it 2 stars. Axel Foley returns to Beverly Hills to help Taggart and Rosewood investigate Chief Bogomil's near-fatal shooting and a series of alphabet crimes associated with it in Paramount Pictures' Beverly Hills Cop 2.
All of you eat the floor! Now! Go!
Axel Foley is back. Who is he?
I'd say he's a cop.
This is a Detroit badge. What the hell are you doing in Beverly Hills?
I'm going deep undercover.
Back where he doesn't belong.
Excuse me, we're the owners of this house. They're in Hawaii for a week while the construction's happening.
I'm Axel Foley, Beverly Hills building inspector.
You've stolen this house.
How do you steal a house? It's my uncle's house.
Reunited with all his old buddies.
What the hell's going on here? Who the hell are you?
I'm Johnny Wishbone, psychic extraordinaire. If you need me, just think Johnny Wishbone and I come running. Lots and biddles. It's like kibbles and bits, but different.
Oh, this is a big mistake, a big mistake.
Would you lighten up and take some risks?
This is definitely breaking the law.
So how long would it take to shave those legs anyway?
I suppose you're trying to be charming.
Actually, I'm just offering my grooming services.
Get out of here, you degenerate! I want you out of here!
Is this a black thing?
Hey! Sound your alarm! You're gonna break it! I need authorization. Authorize!
Are we having a problem here?
You Hefner! Act the Foley! And this is Max. And Max kills cops for a living!
Well, it is pretty sporty! Don't complain! It's all I can find! Does the steering wheel work in this thing? I'm steering! Well, do the brakes work? I don't know, I haven't tried them yet!
Kill him, burn him, blow him away.
Don't worry about a thing. On the job.
That's what I'm afraid of!
Eddie Murphy, Beverly Hills Cop 2. The Heat's back on.
Mr. Smith, why don't you impart upon our listeners some of the things you were able to dig up about BHC 2?
Okay. So, Beverly Hills Cop 2 from 1987, directed by Mr. Tony Scott. The film was written by Larry Ferguson, who also wrote Highlander, The Presidio, The Hunt for Red October, and Alien 3. He sadly killed himself by dunking his head into an aquarium full of piranhas after writing the remake of Rollerball. Now, it was co-written by Warren Scarron, whose other writing credits include Top Gun, Beetlejuice, and the 1989 version of Batman. Originally, Paramount Pictures expressed interest in turning Beverly Hills Cop into a TV series after the success of the original film. Eddie Murphy rejected the idea as he didn't want to return to TV, but agreed to do the sequel. Now, Martin Brest passed on returning to direct the sequel, so producers Simpson and Bruckheimer turned to Tony Scott, fresh from his success with the 1986 blockbuster Top Gun. Now, I couldn't find much information on why Martin Brest passed on returning, but as we'll get into, they didn't actually have much of a script at the time. And
Still don't. Sorry,
Beverly
what?
Hills, yeah, I never ended up with one. Anyway, Beverly Hills Cop 2 was made, as I said, in 1987, and I think it's very telling that Martin Brest directed Midnight Run in
one of your favorites.
in 1988. So that's why
Maybe he made the better choice.
I think that's why he passed. No script and something better coming down the pipeline. Now, according to editor Billy Weber, Tony Scott wasn't a comedy guy. So after we ran the first cut, Don and Jerry just looked around and shrugged and said, huh? It wasn't a comedy. It played like a straight action movie, which made sense because Tony was an action guy. And that's what he knew how to do best. We just never had a great script, and it never had a chance of being as good as the first movie because the script never got there. Now, they rewrote the script after the first screening and more jokes were shot and added in, and it brought it up a little bit. Eddie also started to act up on the set. The prima donna behavior was starting to show, and he was always late for filming, but he got along great with Tony Scott. Tony Scott described the sequel as a cross between the first movie and 48 Hours. He wishes.
Yeah, right.
Beverly Hills Cop 2 was one of the most anticipated films of 1987, became a box office success upon release. Now, the film debuted at number 1 at the US box office, earning $26 million on its 3-day opening weekend and $33 million over the 4-day Memorial weekend, a sales mark that would result in the film achieving that year's highest opening weekend debut. Beverly Hills Cop 2 grossed $154 million in the US and Canada, becoming the third biggest hit domestically at the box office that year. Now, the film received mixed reviews from critics. On the review aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes, 48% of 40 critics' reviews are positive, with an average rating of 5 out of 10. The website's consensus reads, Eddie Murphy remains appealing as the wisecracking Axel Foley, but Beverly Hills Cop 2 doesn't take him or the viewer anywhere new enough to justify a sequel. Roger Ebert gave the film 1 star out of 4 and wrote, what is comedy? That's a pretty basic question. I know, but Beverly Hills Cop 2 never thought to ask it. Janet Maslin of the New York Times wrote that the film is a skillful clone of the first film that cannot match that one's novelty or excitement. Variety called it a noisy, bumbling, unimaginative, heartless remake of the original film. Sheila Benson of the LA Times wrote, "It's hard to believe that the group who came up with the hard, clean edge of Top Gun, sleek and unfeeling though that may have been, could make a picture as crude, as muddled, as destructo derby-ish as this one." And finally, Eddie Murphy is quoted as saying, "Beverly Hills Cop 2 was probably the most successful mediocre picture in history. It made $250 million worldwide, and it was a half-assed movie. It was basically a rehash, but it wasn't as spontaneous and funny as the original." So there we have it.
Yeah. The big problem is there's no fucking script. There is no plot to this film. We'll get into another 48 hours in a little bit. But the reason they get together in the very first film, there was a reason he had to go from Detroit to Beverly Hills.
Right.
There was no reason for Eddie Murphy, Axel Foley character, to be in Beverly Hills for this movie. There's none. There's no specific thread with which he should be there. There's some convoluted plot of like suddenly there's these robbers who are doing alphabet crap. That is so fucking that's so stupid.
It's very thin. And, you know,
that's the shit we do with Bruce Willis movies. That's how bad that is back then.
Yeah, and also the whole alphabet crimes where they're leaving notes at the crime. That's never addressed why they do that.
There's no reason why they're doing any of these crimes.
Well, no.
Right? Like when we find this group with Bridget Nielsen, who's at this point, this is going to sound terrible, and I do apologize because it's going to sound sexist, and I don't mean it this way. But we're just going to call fucking a unicorn, all right? She's only in this movie for sex appeal. She can't act for shit. If you're going to put her in the movie, just make her be naked. Because at this point, there's no reason for her to be there. I mean, if you want someone to be in a criminal organization that doesn't stick out like a sore thumb, she sticks out like a sore thumb. She's all in white. She's as tall as a fucking Amazonian. You could pick her out of a lineup with your eyes closed. They're already rich, whoever these people are. They own some fancy gun club in Beverly Hills. They're running these crimes for no reason at all. The former police captain there, he's got wind of it or some shit. I don't know. Apparently, he keeps in touch with Axel Foley once a week for some reason we don't know. That's just so that he can go find him. He ends up getting shot and almost kills, but doesn't die. And then for some reason, Axel feels compelled to fly out there and help solve this case, which is not within his jurisdiction, breaking all kinds of laws. And he just shows up, and we just get the old-fashioned Eddie Murphy doing things. And it reminded me of something when I was watching it. There are things in time that when they're happening, you like them because it's part of it. Like Max Headroom. Remember Max Headroom?
I do.
Okay. Max Headroom is a part of the 80s, right? If you see Max Headroom today, you want to punch him in his fucking throat because it gets annoying. Eddie Murphy, the way he used to act in the 80s, after a while in this movie, annoyed the shit out of me. I was like, we get it. This whole fucking hyperactive, just like yelling be crazy, like drove me nuts. I actually wanted him to be shot at one point.
Yeah,
like I couldn't do it.
This is, for me, the worst kind of sequel because it just rehashes all the gags from the first movie.
And not in a good way either.
And not in a good way. No.
Close.
And I think, look, the first movie's lightning in a bottle, like it or not, him going to Beverly Hills was a personal vendetta thing.
Yeah.
Whereas I don't buy it, like you're right, you just don't buy it in this one. It's a flimsy reason to get to Beverly Hills.
Yeah.
And like I say, the whole alphabet crime. Look, I'll give them this, okay? These criminals, maybe they're just greedy, right?
That could be.
And they want loads of cash. I'll give them that. But the whole leaving notes behind after each crime, that never amounts to anything.
No,
that is just
nothing.
Pointless. And Bridget Nielsen, useless. I mean, look, she was great. She was great in Rocky IV.
That's her best role. Her best role is Rocky IV, and then she should have, and maybe Red Sonja. After that, just go away.
No, that wasn't. No,
I was trying to give her some help because she was just
you're being
sexy.
nice. She's being too nice because you want to see her titties. But listen.
But at this point in this film, I would have enjoyed that a lot more than what we saw.
Yeah. You know, she's there purely so Eddie Murphy can make a couple of gags about how tall she is. That is literally the only reason she's in it.
Even the cast that comes back, Reinhold and them, they're useless. They're just there to drive them around. Like the first one, they're combating with each other because, it's two different versions of police work. Like, there's a whole reason for them to have the banter we get in the first movie.
Yeah.
We've got the streetwise cop from Detroit trying to show these
the
little uptight white guys from Beverly Hills how to do things. Works beautifully. In this one, they're just driving them around at this point.
Yeah,
they're just his chauffeur.
Turner Rosewood, do the same thing where they get his name wrong. That's a rehash of the first movie. Turning him into a gun nut is kind of like we're just in major slapstick territory. And what made the first movie cool was the gags work in the first movie, right? And in the first movie, you do have a serious aspect to it. there's thrills and there's danger.
Yeah.
And I talked about this when we originally did an episode with John Wick, where I was like, funny though Beverly Hills Cop is, there is a serious edge to it, where he does get in danger and he is out of his depth at some point, and you are thinking, how's he going to get out of this? Whereas in this, there's no sense, any sort of edge. There's no edge to it. There's no seriousness to it. I mean, Beverly Hills Cop isn't a film people would ever, accuse of being serious, and I'm not really saying that, but there is an inkling of it. There is enough there to kind of, there are stakes, and you are sort of like, oh, what's he going to do here? And oh shit, he's outnumbered, and when he's in that warehouse and they've pinned him up and they're beating the shit out of him, you are sort of thinking, oh fuck, what's going down here? What's going to happen? Because he's like John McClane in the sense that he's not going to grab a fucking M16 and start jumping through windows and whatnot. He's in danger, and there are stakes there. This movie is just an excuse to rehash the gags from the first movie. The action is bigger, I'll give it that. But
you got Tony Scott, and I even feel like they waste his talents in this film, right? Like Tony Scott's an amazing action director, and because they don't like Tony Scott, they, as you said in your notes, filmed an action movie. They wanted a buddy cop movie. Like, they didn't tell Tony Scott this. I bet there's some stuff that's missing that with some pretty decent action sequences. Because if you look at it, this is the same film we get from, because we've already covered Tony Scott when we look at The Last Boy Scout, right? We talked about how, unfortunately, Eddie Murphy would have been a better role than who we got in that film.
You couldn't have afforded Eddie Murphy and
No,
Bruce
I know,
Willis,
but I'm just saying, that was one, you had a better script because of, obviously, we know who the writer was. Yeah. But it's similar vein of what we're trying to do, and we let Tony Scott do what he does best, which is his action, and then you add in that comic element.
Yeah, in the defense of Tony Scott, he filmed the script he was given.
I agree. No, I'm not blaming Tony Scott on this. I'm just saying because they didn't know what they were filming.
So
he didn't get a chance to get, I feel like they cut a lot of maybe some of his action stuff because they wanted an action comedy. So they reshot some of this comedy stuff. So it makes it feel so just discombobulated. There are action set pieces that, so for instance, when we do the action stuff, we've got, Bridget Nielsen's character, they're doing countdowns, they're trying to make this like a heist film when they're doing those moments. But what ruins it is then we've got we bring in the Eddie Murphy stuff and then we have to add the extra comedy stuff level to it. And it just feels like we don't know what film we're trying to make here. Am I supposed to think these are guys, this is a heist? Or is this supposed to be just bumbling fuck around? Because, like you said, those villains never once threaten, even seem like our heroes are in trouble. Even in the end shootout, I never once was like, as soon as Eddie Murphy shows up on the scene, we already know this is going to end. We're going to make our way to the end. We're going to get the bad guys and everything's going to be solved.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in the first movie, Axel Foley, he uncovers, he does some detective work.
Yeah.
And he finds a criminal. He finds, a criminal empire. He figures it out. There is a plot to that. There is he's just gone to LA. He's just gone to Hollywood and all this shit. He's like my buddy's. Someone's come to Detroit to kill my best friend. This is wrong. I'm going to go and find out what's been going on. And it escalates, and he finds this, these big time drug dealers.
Yeah, it's like a cross country crime that's going on.
But there's
a
plot, and he unearths what's going on. He does some detective work, whereas in this one, no.
All this one is hey, I find out my buddy got shot. You send him some fucking flowers and check in on him a couple of weeks to see how he's doing. I mean, he's a cop. He's in the middle of an undercover investigation. He fucking just walks away from that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Ronnie Cox. I mean, he's a cop. He's been shot. That's
and
not
it's not
that.
Even
that's,
that. And it's
that's
not
line
even
of
that funny.
duty shit.
Yeah.
That's just that's
I mean,
your
the
job.
stuff is supposed to be comedic. The funniest stuff is his captain from Detroit. Every time you need money, makes my dick itch. He's the funny guy. He's good. And there's a few things, but otherwise it's just literally Eddie Murphy doing some kind of funny impersonation, yelling a lot to get people to just believe that the badge he has is what he's doing.
Yeah. And we've got rehashes of gags from, and instead of Damon Wayans in Beverly Hills Cop, we've got Chris Rock in Beverly Hills Cop 2. I'm not one of those people who believes that, that because there was this thing at a certain period of time where, well, what sequels need to be is the same as the first movie, but you just change the plot. But you do exactly what the first one did because that's what people want. And I've never been a believer of that.
But Die Hard 2 did change it up a bit. Die Hard 2 did. We had that discussion first episode of this season. Die Hard 2 did change up a bit, and I think we'll talk about it again in another 48 hours. Similar things happening here as well. But in 1987, Eddie Murphy's coming out with Beverly Hills Cop 2. You're going to go see it because he's fucking hot as a red poker. Yeah. And I'm sure there's some moments in it people are like, oh, it was okay. But at the end of the day, the reason people don't talk about it in this glamorous way is because it's one of those movies, if I never see it again, I will not hurt my feelings.
It's been a very long, I don't know about you, but it's been a very long time since I'd seen this one.
I'm going to go on a limb that say unless something drastic happens, this is probably the only other time I ever see it again in my lifetime. I don't know the next time I'll see Beverly Hills Cop 2 ever again. And I was excited about going to see it because, you know, the thing is like what I love about what we're doing is there are a lot of these movies that I haven't seen in a long time. And so like we've talked about before, my memory of some of them is fragmented. Like I put together pieces of what I think the film is. There's like, oh yeah, I think it's this. And then it's like, no, I think I've put together 7 other movies into this one film. And so when you go back to see it again, you're like, okay, I want to see, you know, because this is Eddie Murphy. This is 1987. The best part of this movie is Bob Seger's shakedown. I fucking love that. So if the only thing we ever get out of Beverly Hills Cop 2 is Bob Seger's shakedown, fucking phenomenal. Because I think that, I mean, that's become the song of the series, and that came in at number 2. I fucking love that song. So for that alone, I will tip my hat that we got Bob Seger's shakedown. All right, we're good.
But the first movie's kind of close to my heart because it came out when I was 12, right? And when I was 12, I looked about 9, right? So there was no way. That was a certificate 15 in the UK. There was no way I was going to get to see it, right? But tangent, this is a slight tangent, but me and my family went on holiday and we were on not a cruise ship, but we were taking a ferry over to somewhere and they were playing Beverly Hills Cop on the cinema on the boat. And there was no, you know, that anyone could walk in.
They didn't give a fuck. They already got your money. I don't care.
Yeah,
Go see some titties, kid. Get in there.
I just walked into the cinema on the boat and I was then allowed to see it. And that's always, and that blew my mind because of the amount of swearing in it. And Eddie Murphy was just...
Yeah, he was great.
So the first one's so close to my heart. And I remember when Beverly Hills Cop 2 came out and I saw it and I was just like, even then, I wasn't really that much older. And I was just like, man, this is not, even then, what I'm saying is it's not like I loved it when I was younger and now I look at it and I think it sucks. I didn't even like it when I was like fucking 15 or whatever it was, or 14, 15. I didn't even like it then. And I barely watched it since. And I watched it again for this episode. And it's as mediocre as I remembered, you know. It hasn't sort of, it's not like, oh no, I was wrong, I was being too harsh.
Yep. It's got some flash, but it's just...
But that's it. I mean, and Tony Scott does flash very well.
Again, like, I don't want to put this... well, we can't put it on Tony because we've seen enough of his films. Yeah. This is just, like you said, Bruckheimer thought they were getting something, and Tony Scott said, I just did Top Gun. Where did you see comedy there? The comedy's built into the action parts. Like, where do you see it? So,
well, Tony Scott is like, well, I'm going to do what I do.
Yeah.
And this is the script you've given me.
And when you let Tony Scott do what he does, he's a spectacular
They've
action
watched
director.
it back and only then realised they forgot to put some jokes in there.
And then you can tell where Eddie Murphy added the jokes because
so then they turn to Eddie Murphy, who's got limited, you know, he's not a writer, you know, he's not.
No, so but he's going to lean into who Axel Foley is, so he's going to keep that character alive.
Yeah, so, but he took, even at that point, even that early on in his career, he took the easy path and just rehashed the same fucking jokes from the first movie. Yeah.
Without some of the good characters, like we don't get Surge. Like there's some guys, there's some comedic people to bounce off with him that he doesn't have in this movie. It's just all Eddie doing it all.
Bronson Pinchot.
Yeah.
Well, he was on a sitcom at the time and he couldn't.
That's right. That he was Perfect Strangers. Yep, Strangers.
Yeah, he couldn't get away from his obligations, so they couldn't put Serge in the second one. Unfortunately, he returns for the third one, and we all know how that went.
You know, look, it is a place and time of an era that, you know, I kind of miss sometimes. Like, we've got some decent stuff coming out here and there, but there is something about just the way that we were pumping things out in the 80s, good or bad, that I do miss. I miss the freshness of some things and the change. We don't have a lot of it, but this one just doesn't...
It doesn't deliver, really. It's
not at all.
It's not funny enough or violent enough.
Yeah,
you know,
it's not the two things of the two people we've got, right? So you got Tony Scott and you've got Eddie Murphy. Violent and funny is what it should be, and the misses out of both.
You haven't got enough of either, and it just kind of meanders along in this kind of pretty pedestrian sort of way, and it just rehashes, and it's too soon to be rehashing.
Yes,
I think, you know, between Beverly Hills Cop and Beverly Hills Cop 2, you know, you've got 3 years, and you're already in a desperate situation where you've got to rehash everything. I get it when you throw back, you know, if you'd have done it in Beverly Hills Cop 3 or 4, you can sort of be like, well, you know, they're just kind of, their little winks, their little Easter eggs and nods to the past. But when you're doing it at the time already, that's...
I'm just surprised at this point they just didn't make a move to Beverly Hills and become a cop in Beverly Hills.
Well, I mean, if you made another Trading Places now, you could add a few winks in there to the original, and we'd probably love it. But not when that's so close. In the space of Beverly Hills Cop and Beverly Hills Cop 2 coming out, that's not 3 years, really, is it? because Beverly Hills Cop was still a staple that people were watching in 86, 85.
Oh, yeah. Because now you're getting cable. It's going to be being pumped on all the channels you can find them now.
Exactly, yeah. Home video was probably still... Beverly Hills Cop was probably a regular rental in 1986. So to be rehashing the jokes that soon is pretty desperate.
Yeah, big time. It's unfortunate. That'll lead us to this, and I've got an answer for the first time I haven't had yet. Is this film worthy of being a sequel, in your opinion, Mr. Smith?
No, not at all.
First time I've had to say that, and I 100% believe it. This doesn't elevate anything. All right, look, how about this, folks? If for just Shakedown, then yes. If for just Shakedown, then that's the only reason it's worth being a sequel to get the song.
That's not enough, man. I'm sorry.
No, other than that, it doesn't add anything.
I'm going to have to pull rank. You're spending a night in the hole.
Other than that song, there's no reason for it. I mean, it doesn't elevate it, doesn't change the character, doesn't add anything to it. It's not even the further adventures of Axel Foley.
Not really.
It's just like, hey, Axel Foley's fucking around again. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
Well, they're back at the strip. They're back at the strip club again. He does the thing where instead of staying at the Beverly Hotel, he's took someone's house. It's just all the familiar beats, but they're far too familiar at that point, even back then. So, and the story is so weak, really. Like I say, the whole alphabet thing, which is like, we leave these like notes behind to let them know it was us, but you don't want them to know it's you. You're trying to get away with stuff. You're not a serial killer leaving clues behind because you secretly want to be caught. Blah 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 blah. No, you want to get away. You don't leave fucking clues. This is just badly handled and badly thought out.
The script is dog shit. It's just dog shit. However, I guess at the end of the day, you could say they shined this shit because they were able to get something out of it.
Well,
I mean, honestly, in Lester Hands, we've seen this exact stuff in our Bruce days. So these are plenty of this kind of where it doesn't get shined. It just is a full-on dull turd from the drop into the bowl. But yeah, not worthy. Now, this is hard to rank because I really think they just kind of almost go in sequential order. But for me, this would be number 2. I've got the original, obviously, this. Then I think Axel F wasn't bad, and then 3. Honestly, they don't need any of them after Beverly Hills Cop. In my opinion, you told your story in Beverly Hills Cop. A lot like Die Hard. Die Hard 2 may have been the last one they needed. After that, there's not a whole lot that you needed after that.
No.
And I love John McClane, but it doesn't add to his lore or add to the story. They just really become, like you say, the further adventures. And after all, I don't really care anymore. I've lost who that person was. I liked the original stuff they did, and I was good with them there.
Yeah, I think, obviously, Beverly Hills Cop is number 1. I think the problem with the other 3 is they're all the same.
And there's a 5th coming out. Hold your horses, folks. Get ready.
So, I would say I think Beverly Hills Cop 3 is a fucking absolute travesty.
That's
so I would go 1, 2, 4, 3. But that's not to say 4 was good.
No, but just saying it's better than 3.
But 3 is bad, and that's John Landis, for fuck's sake. 3 had no right being that bad.
Tony Scott and Landis are the two who, those are the guys in the middle. You wouldn't think those would be the guys who would be saying are the ones who had some tough ones.
I remember reading an interview with John Landis, and he was saying that the problem with Beverly Hills Cop 3 is that Eddie Murphy wasn't funny anymore. He said because when they made Coming to America together, he said he could literally turn the camera on and Eddie Murphy would just let rip. He said, but by the time we got to Beverly Hills Cop 3, Eddie had he wasn't where he mentally sharp enough, and he made no attempt to make it any funnier than what was on the page. And John Landis sort of said that what was on the page wasn't funny enough, but I still believed in the old Eddie Murphy, who would elevate it, and he didn't. So I would, 1, 2, 4, 3. And 4 sucks. But there you go.
There you go. All right, that'll move us on to our blue corner combatant, being 1990, Another 48 Hours.
It's time for the tale of the tape. Another 48 Hours was released in 1990, written by John Fasano, Jeb Stewart, and Larry Gross, and directed by Walter Hill, starring Eddie Murphy, Nick Nolte, Brian James, Kevin Teague, Edo Ross, David Anthony Marshall, Andrew Divoff, Bernie Casey, and Tisha Campbell. Made on a budget of $50 million and grossing $153.5 million at the box office. It holds a 5.9 rating on IMDb with a 19 critics and 35 audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. On Letterboxd, Steve gives this 3 stars while Scott gives it 2.5 stars. Jack Cates once again enlists the aid of ex-con Reggie Hammond, this time to take down the Iceman, a ruthless drug lord operating in the San Francisco area. In Paramount Pictures, Another 48 Hours.
You don't know what you do to me. Want to kiss myself. God, and I got the feeling. Hey.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3.
It's been 7 long years.
Look, I got 48 hours to bring this guy in. I'm history.
You want me to go out with you for another 48 hours?
Now look, Reggie, this time I promise you it's gonna be different.
But Eddie Murphy and Nick Nolte are back.
Let me tell you something. I ain't working for you. I don't like you, and I don't trust you.
Welcome back, Red.
And they're making up for lost time.
We got the same car, same clothes.
That's the way I like it. I get attached to things, Reggie.
Another 48 hours.
Oh, you're in trouble with the law this time. Good.
Eddie Murphy, Nick Nolte.
I'm driving.
I was wanting a chauffeur, Reggie.
Another 48 hours.
Roxanne, you don't have to put on a red light.
Now, this film is the last of 7 consecutive Eddie Murphy movies to open at number 1 at the box office. He didn't have another number 1 until The Nutty Professor in 1996. The paydays for the 2 leads changed dramatically from the first movie to the sequel, with Nick Nolte being paid $1 million for the original and $3 million for the sequel, while Eddie was paid only $450,000 for the original and $9 million for the sequel. That is a fucking jump. Now, the original work print was 145 minutes long. It was cut either by Walter Hill or Paramount down to 120 minutes, and a week before its summer theatrical release, an additional 25 minutes were cut out by Paramount, making a final theatrical version 95 minutes long. Frank McRae's reprisal of his role from 48 Hours was entirely cut except for a brief uncredited shot of him in the background of one scene in the police station. Brian James, also returning from the original, saw his role severely cut down as well to create a faster-paced action comedy. Also removed was a scene partially shown in the theatrical trailer in which Jack explains to Reggie that he has a deadline to track down the Iceman. As such, there is no mention of 48 Hours anywhere in the final film. Eddie Murphy is one of the people who wrote the story for the film, however. He used the fictitious name Fred Broughton for his credit. The pen with the undressing woman that Cates is playing with while clearing his desk also appears in another Walter Hill film starring Nick Nolte, Extreme Prejudice from 1987. Apparently, Mr. Hill and Mr. Nolte are big fans of naked pens. I remember it was funny when I saw that in the rewatch. I was like, "Oh my god, I remember that."
I remember them pens.
I remember like someone like trying to bring one into school and be like, "Look what I got." Ooh. I took the pen. You're all like, "Ooh, naked girl on a pen." You kids who have the internet have no idea what we went through to get to pornography.
We jerked off to pens, goddammit.
God damn it, a pen stripping itself made us ejaculate. Sorry. In an interview with David Letterman, Eddie Murphy admits he doesn't like watching another 48 Hours because he gained too much weight during the production of the film. That's wild. According to Halliwell's Film Guide, this sequel was a virtual remake of 48 Hours, while rating the movie states that it duplicates the famous sequences that made the first film a success. Even though the film made money, Murphy accused Paramount of not spending enough on advertising and changing the release date. Paramount counter-alleged that Murphy did not spend enough time promoting the film. This led to tension in the long-running relationship between Murphy and Paramount. And finally, Vincent Canby of the New York Times stated, "Though the body count is high, all the people killed are faceless or only minor characters until the end. It's as if the movie was saying that lethal violence is acceptable and fun as long as the victims, like the victims of guided missiles and high-altitude bombing, remain anonymous. Any comedy that allows the mind to ponder high-altitude bombing is in deep trouble." I like that. Well, I'll start with the, I think the script this least way around, while yes, we are definitely doing some rehashing, for sure. For sure.
Definitely.
At least the reason the two gentlemen got together makes some fucking sense. So right out the gate, that already made the movie more watchable for me, because I at least was like, okay, you've given me a reason why these two gentlemen have to be thrown together after 9 years, or 7 years, whatever it was. So like, at least made it make sense as opposed to like, well, this one guy who took a shit, had a quarter in his shit, he's in the hospital, I got to go out there and find out whose quarter this is. Like, it didn't make any sense why we had the Beverly Hills Cop thing happen. But at least in this one, there's a little bit more, even if it's veiled thread. I'm not trying to say that we've suddenly created, this didn't go from like New Hope to Empire Strikes Back, where suddenly we've elevated this franchise, but I at least believed in why we had a story.
This one is a continuation of the same plot. This is an expansion of that plot. This is all part of the same story. They at least did that.
Yes, I'll give them that credit, even if it's
no,
the story's the same.
No,
but at least
it's not
you
exactly.
believe it.
It's not a mind blower, but
you could watch 48 Hours into another 48 Hours and be like, well, now we know why this is happening.
We're not in Kill Bill territory. I'll get,
no.
But it's kind of, I get it. I get it. I'm with it. I understand it. It makes sense. But like, it's a thin thin-ish, but not as thin as Beverly Hills Cop 2.
At least Eddie Murphy's not too over the top in this one. I mean, I could handle his comedy in it. He and Nick Nolte, I mean, even though it had been, 8 years? And like you said, the very first film Eddie Murphy ever did was 48 Hours. The fact that these two get together 8 years later, and for those who don't remember, 48 Hours is in our top 100 films of all time. Mr. Smith put it in there. It's one of his favorites.
I absolutely love. And as I pointed out when we put it in the top 100, this is the film that really shaped Shane Black. This film that this was the catalyst for what, I mean, not that he didn't write, but I just mean he saw 48 Hours and he was like, everything clicked into place for him, which is why he went on to do so many of that type of movie. Yeah, the buddy cop thing.
Now, we're not saying this is as good as the original. Very few are Apes trilogy we talked about, where the next one makes the next one better.
For me, the song on the soundtrack, the boys are back in town. When I watch another 48 Hours, which is not often, for fans of Walter Hill, and 48 Hours, they're back. Walter Hill, Eddie Murphy, and Nick Nolte are back. They haven't teamed Nick Nolte up with another criminal. They haven't teamed Eddie Murphy up with a different cop.
And he hasn't forgotten the shit that Nick Nolte did to him.
Yeah, it's pretty organically it's all related. And I do love the to and fro stuff with Eddie and Nolte. That they are a good pair. And
they really are.
They're as good as any. They're pretty up there for me. It's quite a big expansion. There's quite a lot of plot actually in this.
But it's funny because you'll notice it lost a little bit of its edge from the early one, right? Because there was that scene in the hotel, the shootout, where Paramount thought it was so violent. They said and I forgot to put this in my notes, they told Walter Hill, "You'll never work for Paramount again." And yet here he is doing the sequel for the same company. So they got over that quickly. But even some of the violence is a little more cartoonish this time around a little bit, a little less realistic. Because when Nick is shot in the beginning of the movie, shot with a 50 cal handgun, it goes through the vest. How about this? In the reality of life, and I know, look, I know it's a movie, but if we did reality, this movie's over in the first 15 minutes in that attack. It's the most successful hit ever by those bikers.
After his visit to the hospital after being shot, he is bandaged up though. So,
but no, in reality, it is the most successful hit in movie franchise ever. They shoot Nick Nolte sitting at the table with a 50 cal. He's dead in reality. And then they flip that bus that Reggie Hammond is not even wearing a seatbelt. And he doesn't get scratched. Not as a scratch on him. His hair's not out of place. He's dead as well.
He does cough a bit, though. He does cough a bit when it gets out.
They kill those two, immediately. It's the best. I wrote that down. I was in reality, this is the greatest hit I've ever seen.
In cinematic terms, it's the worst hit.
It's the worst hit ever because they survive both, yeah. Not even a few bandages and maybe a cold.
Yeah.
Somehow Eddie Murphy got a little cold from the bus rolling.
What I do like about this movie is it's pretty sort of well paced. From the get go, it kind of, you're in straight away. It doesn't waste any time.
Because we got 48 hours.
All true.
That's all we got, my friend. We got 48 hours that we don't know.
Well,
about.
we haven't even got that. We've got 93 minutes. But
this is true. We had 48 hours.
That wasn't as catchy a title though. But yeah, so I'll give it that. It kind of gets going straight away, and we're in the. It doesn't hold back.
No.
Nick Nolte's at the racetrack and. Fucking people are on fire and
people
Eddie Murphy, the coach, the coach
he hits
flipping
him,
over.
He hits Nolte, comes to visit him, hits him in the face with a basketball, fights him.
And in true Walter Hill style, this is he injects as much of a western into it as he can.
Yeah, the beginning is so weird.
Yeah,
I was like, who actually owns this bar? There's no one here. It's in the middle of nowhere. Who put this thing here? It's just and they're standing there silently, those two guys, and then finally 5 minutes in, after we get this whole big dramatic Once Upon a Time in the West reference.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
All of a sudden, he asks the guy if he wants something to drink. How long has this guy been in your bar? How are you not selling? It's their first customer you've had in probably a year.
He finally asked him after 3 days if he wants a drink.
Jesus Christ.
But, he injects as much of a Western vibe into it as he can, which is so Walter Hill anyway. That's, every movie is made apart from Brewster's Millions, which freaks me out every time I talk about Walter Hill. I have to remember he made Brewster's Millions, which is
so does he.
Up.
So does he. That'll be on his tombstone. The guy, here lies the man who made Brewster's Millions.
Which I kind of like. But this one is, this is pretty action heavy. It's funny, but not a comedy.
Yep. It's an action movie that's got comedic beats, which is what Beverly Hills Cop 2 should have been.
Yeah.
That's what it should have been.
And it is funnier. It is funnier than the original 48 Hours. That's not really a compliment, but that just goes to show why Eddie Murphy's getting $9 million.
Yeah. Look, there's a lot of issues from the last film because clearly they didn't have a script and a whole lot of things. There's a lot of miscommunication going on in Beverly Hills Cop 2. We've got Tony Scott making an action movie, and then the company thinks they're making a comedy. So There's a lot of things that are missing. in this film, Eddie Murphy doesn't have to, because Eddie Murphy's the star of Beverly Hills Cop 2. There's no, everyone else there is just there to at least have someone on screen with him. Otherwise just a one-man play. And that's basically probably what Eddie Murphy would have preferred.
And that's a problem.
In this one, there's a lot more characters, a lot more people. We've got, I mean, we even get to spend time with the bad guys. Like, we have like 3 minutes with the bad guys in the other one. We could give two shits what's happening in that other fucking group. This one, at least, we're looking who the Iceman is. We've got all these things happening. Reggie's always a guy from prison to keep him alive. Like, there's things that are moving that keep us moving with the characters, as opposed to being like, okay, one funny thing from Eddie to an action sequence, which was the last film. So this one definitely similar time frame, but I felt like it moved along with a better pace and was a little clearer.
Yeah, and two of the villains in Another 48 Hours are from, they're also in Red Heat as well.
Well, here's the problem, right? So there are some guys from the 80s, and if you're in a Gen Xer, and I believe a lot of the people who probably listen to this are, you know what I'm talking about. But the two guys who end up being part of the Iceman's group, who are also supposed to be friends of Nick Nolte's character, you can't help but every time you see him go, this guy's a bad guy. Like, you go, he's in every movie. These two guys are bad guys.
Yeah,
and then you're like,
always,
I think they're bad guys. Like, it's almost like I'm pretty sure, like, as soon as I found out that, I was like, I'm pretty sure the Iceman's a cop. And then I was like, I already know who it is. I was like, it's one of these two guys or both of them. Like, I just knew, it was like, these guys are always playing these guys. Well, like the one guy, the guy who ends up being the Iceman, he's also a bad guy in Tango and Cash. Like, he's a bad guy in almost every fucking film.
He's in fucking Blade Runner is one of the replicants in Blade Runner.
Yes, exactly.
And Ed Ross. I fucking can't remember the motherfucker's name, but he was the Russian bad guy in Red Heat.
Yep.
And you've got and the black guy with the glasses. He's in Red Heat. He was in prison in Red Heat. So Walt Hill's another one of those guys. He's got his stock characters that he goes back to for his movies. But
it's the problem is as the 80s go on, these guys play the same characters.
But you're absolutely right. Like Brian James.
Now you go, bad guy. Yep, he's a bad guy.
I'd like to maybe find it. Is there a film with Brian James in it where he's not a bad guy?
Or any of those guys? Do any of them play like some nice priest or something like that? Some guy who helps the homeless?
The guy in prison, Eddie Murphy owes the favour to when he punches through the glass and everything. That was a great little moment.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good shit in this movie. And it zips along.
One of my favorite moments, though, is when they go to the biker bar and there's this sax pop band. That's the fucking. I was like, what? When that happened, I was like, where the fuck am I right now?
Well, it's a 1982 throwback.
What tough bar has a sax pop band as its main fucking act? I'm like, what is happening right now?
Yeah, that was brutal.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Like, I'm expecting a couple long-haired, racist guys playing blues music, and I've got these maybe European black guys playing sax and pop music. I'm like, where are we right now?
Rough.
Yeah. That was like one of my few notes I put. I was like, where are we right now? What is happening right
We're
now?
in 1982 is where we are.
Except it's 1990.
Yeah, I know. But I do like it I do like it when Eddie Murphy goes up to that girl to get him to buy him a drink. Just tells him to fuck off. He ain't got any money.
There's some good moments in it. Do we have some TNA in this one? I can't remember now. I thought maybe
not enough.
Not enough. But a lot of shootouts. I will give you that. One thing Walter loves is he likes to shoot 357 Magnums and 44s.
And whenever a gun goes off, it sounds like a fucking atomic bomb's going off every time someone shoots a gun.
Absolutely.
And, the two biker guys, one of the biker guys being the brother of James Remar's character in the first one. So, there's all these
There's a connection. It makes sense why we're in this movie.
Yeah,
it makes sense why this is happening.
Yeah, true.
I mean, look, do any movies really need a sequel? Probably not. Like, does Die Hard need a sequel? No. I wasn't like, oh shit,
but we're going to get them and we have to accept it. And that's what this is all about. It just comes
down to do is it fun? And, some of them have been fun. You go, yeah, okay, that was actually, I'm enjoyed this story. And I'm in the camp of, I kind of enjoyed this. I wasn't blown away. I was like, oh my God, I know so much more. They further the characters. But if I had to do a double feature and someone said, hey, why don't you sit down and watch the two 48-hour movies? I could watch them both and be like, okay. And I'm glad they didn't make a third because there's no need. They said, you know what? We wrap this up. Another one is just now, there's no reason for these two to be gentlemen to be together ever again after this moment.
Another little thing, there's no way to word this carefully, but I kind of appreciated the racism in 48 Hours.
I know what you mean. It talked about the things that were going on at that time frame that we were
and by
being
the
quiet
end
about.
And by the end of 48 Hours, Nick Nolte's kind of acknowledged his ignorance and they've got a kind of camaraderie by the end, And in this one, they don't rehash that. There's little nods. There's a couple of little things. But he calls him convict still, So he still likes that separation, but that's not racially anymore. He's sort of he's learned the error of his ways somewhat.
And it's been 7 years since they've had this, so you would have hoped that by now.
Exactly. So, that's acknowledged. So there's just so much more to this. Whether you think this deserves to be made or whatnot. I'm sure there's people out there who love 48 Hours so much and they think any idea of a sequel is sacrilege. Maybe. And I'm surprisingly not one of them. I do own both the 48 Hours movies. I bought 48 Hours and it came with another 48 Hours in the box. I'm not sure I would have bought another 48 Hours on its own. So that's difficult for me. I don't love it, but it is kind of worthy. It deserves its place. And, Walter Hill to me is someone who, up until probably 10 years ago, I'd always be interested in what he was up to. He's lost the plot now, but he's probably about 90 years old, for God's sake. But, where he's a 70s guy, he was working with fucking Peckinpah and all these guys, back in the day. And that's why the Western thing I always think is, you look at Southern Comfort, he's done a lot of great stuff. And Walter Hill is a very important component to this sequel.
Mm-hmm. I think that's why it works, because there's a common thread.
Who's to say if Martin Brest would have stuck around for the sequel?
Different, yeah.
That's what this has over Beverly Hills Cop. But another thing it has over it is that you've got the same director returning, and I think that's important. When John McTiernan came back for Die Hard 3.
Although like I said, Die Hard 2 does hold its
I love
own
Die
merits.
Hard 2. I'm a big fan, but there's elements that John McTiernan brought to the Die Hard thing that you felt comfortable with. You found out that Rennie Harlan wasn't a bad director for 2, but you're in good hands with John McTiernan, and I think you kind of know you're in good hands with Walter Hill. These are old school, traditional action movie directors, and that fortunately is another thing that Another 48 Hours has got in its corner.
All right, well then I think we both have the same feeling, but do you feel that this is a worthy sequel to the original 48 Hours?
Yeah, I do, and like I just said, really, I think the plot is a continuation. You've got everyone back playing the roles that they were good at. That's not like things haven't changed that much. Mm-hmm. But the plot is the main thing for me. You've got the gang. You've got Walter Hill, Eddie, and Nick Nolte back. You've got a continuation of the plot, and it doesn't pussy out either. It sticks to its roots of being an action movie with some comedy, and Eddie's a bit more restrained in this. So I think it definitely deserves to be a sequel. It deserves its place.
I agree, because it finishes the story. Plus, if you like the original and you always felt like you wish Bridget Hammonds got out and didn't have to go back to prison, he finishes his sentence, he gets out, now you get a chance to see him now move on in his life. And they kind of end everything that needs to keep them together. They've tie everything up with a nice neat bow, and both these men can now go about their day, and it was an enjoyable movie. It was an enjoyable 90 plus minutes.
Well, Eddie gets his money, but Nick Nolte shoots him first, so it's still got that kind of sort of edge to it.
It was fun. It was I was, except for the fact that they were both killed in the first 15 minutes of the film in one of the greatest hits in cinema history. That didn't turn out that way because of the way it was written. But truly, you talk about, you want to get rid of two people. Shot a guy with a 50 cal in a diner, he's dead, and then we flip a bus 100 times. He's dead, and we roll off into the sunset and have sex with this sweet Asian chick. All right, so, I think we know where this ranks. This goes number 2 behind the original.
Well, yeah.
That's the way it goes.
Yeah.
You're not going to
They knew when to fucking call it a die on this.
Yep, and I'm glad they did. Because, you don't need...
Yeah, you don't need yet another 48 hours. You don't need 48 hours more, and then the last 48 hours, and they're in a fucking old people's home, and they can pick one over the remote, and eating too much pudding. That's what you'd have. And we didn't get that. Fortunately, they knew when to call it quits.
Oh, very true. Very true. All right, now it is time for us to sort through the debris and decide who the winner of our Eddie Murphy Buddy Cop sequel showdown is.
Let's go to the card.
And we start with Best Action Sequences.
Best Action Sequences.
And for my money, there was some interesting things in Beverly Hills Cop. The way it opened up, was reminiscent of the game Grand Theft Auto a little bit here. There's a few things in Grand Theft Auto I saw they may have taken. But overall, very forgettable. For me, I enjoyed the action sequences in Another 48 Hours. I think the shootouts, like you said, the gunshots, it sounds like we're in war. It was, I mean, you know, like it's more memorable to me what happened. Even the hit that doesn't happen, the greatest hit ever that didn't happen in movie terms was a lot more enjoyable. I loved the action beats and stuff that happened in it. So even, I mean, Nick Nolte blows the guy up at the racetrack, which I did find funny. They're riding bikes. No one stops riding bikes after that guy blows up. There's an explosion on the racetrack. And everyone is just still like, hey, there's a race going on. Let's everyone calm down a minute and see what happens. But for me, I'm picking Another 48 Hours. Mr. Smith, what gets your vote?
Yeah, we've got to give Beverly Hills Cop 2 some credit for its action because it's Tony Scott. Yeah? So fortunately they had that. But that's where it ends. The heist at the beginning is pretty cool. Actually, you can get a kind of feeling for where Tony Scott was headed with at the beginning because that is a pretty slam bang, all business kind of heist. And you can kind of get a vibe of what Tony Scott was trying to do, but that's about as good as it gets because the shootout at the end is a bit A-team, isn't it? You know.
Yeah,
and Judge Reinhold,
no stakes at all.
And Judge Reinhold being the gun nut at the end, that was all a bit goofy and stupid. Whereas in Another 48 Hours, it's all business, serious action, serious violence, pretty relentless.
They're being hunted down by these bikers. They're being hunted down left, right, and center for it.
Yeah, you know, and you're in the hands of a master here in Walter Hill. You know, he didn't write the book on it, but he's in one of the most important action directors of all time. And I think he does some stellar work in this. So yeah, for me, it's Another 48 Hours all the way.
Best supporting characters.
All right, that brings us to Best Supporting Characters. Now, you know, you would think, considering how character-driven Beverly Hills Cop, the original, truly was, you know, you decide who the fish out of water is between either the Reinhold characters from Beverly Hills or Foley from Detroit, depending how you look at that movie. But they're all out of their element. And that was great fun, which made that such a good movie. But unfortunately, it's just the Eddie Murphy show in the sequel. Everyone else is just there to just not make it be a one-man play. I felt, as I said earlier when we talked about Another 40 Hours, I feel like we get stuff on the bad guys. We get stuff on Nick. We get Eddie by himself. There is so much more going on with all the characters in this film that are actually relevant that I feel that they have the best supporting characters. That without it, I mean, it is the whole central part of the film. Yes, we've got two leads, but there's so much going on between who's the Iceman, who's this, who's the black guy with the glasses, why are they after this? Like, so many other characters make the movie fuller. I remember them more than any of the others. Yeah, Bridget Nielsen's there because she's tall and sexy in the 1980s, but she adds nothing to that film. And Reinhold and the other guy are just there to be his escorts, and they don't really add anything either. So they just fell flat in the second, where I feel Nolte and co with Eddie are much better in this one. So I give it to Another 48 Hours.
Yeah, I mean, I've only just thought of this really, that I don't think Eddie Murphy is good enough on his own, right?
Unless, of course, you're talking about Coming to America, then Eddie Murphy.
Well, then you get 10 Eddie Murphys, granted. Yeah. Valid point. But thinking like Trading Places, 48 Hours, you know, he's teamed up with someone else. And I think that's where you've got the yin and the yang, and you can, if you've got someone to bounce off, he's far better off. And I do think actually in Beverly Hills Cop, him and Judge Reinhold and, sorry, the other guy.
John Ashton. Just recently passed just after
he was
the new
great.
one came
He was
out.
great in Midnight Run. This would have been a problem, Midnight Run versus Another 48 Hours. In fact, it wouldn't have been, actually. We wouldn't even be discussing Another 48 Hours. But yeah, I think Eddie Murphy's he's better when he's working with someone else. I don't think he's good enough on his own. And I think everyone, as you pointed out earlier, everyone in Beverly Hills Cop 2 is just back in the background, you know. And when they do get a chance to step forward, Judge Reinhold is goofy as fuck, and that just doesn't work. Another 48 Hours, you know, Nolte and Eddie bouncing off of each other, you know, the two brothers, the biker horsemen brothers, you know, they're great too. Literally everyone who gets screen time in Another 48 Hours deserves to be there, and I just think because they're part of the plot, they're part of the whole thing. Because you've got the Iceman, and you've got forgot to mention him, the Internal Affairs guy, from Roadhouse.
Yeah, they're the Roadhouse boss.
Yeah, the Roadhouse boss, the double deuce.
The douche.
He's a sleazebag and something else as well. I can't remember.
Yeah, he plays a lot of sleazebags.
Yeah,
people were pigeonholed in the 80s.
Yeah, I mean, he was very good as well. So I think you'd really have to give it to Another 48 Hours. Everyone's a familiar face in Another 48 Hours, it seems. Yep. Andrew Divoff, who plays the biker guy, he's in quite a lot of good stuff as well. He's got that kind of face. That's just filled to the brim with good character actors playing pretty decent characters in the movie. So really, sorry, man, it's no love for Beverly Hills Cop 2 here. It's Another 48 Hours, yeah.
Funniest moments.
All right, so funniest moments. That was kind of a toss-up for me, but the moments that made me laugh the most actually happened in Beverly Hills Cop 2. Whenever he talks with his captain, I fucking love that guy. I think he was funnier than Eddie to me. You know, they're having that big argument. Every time you need money makes my dick itch. Like, just some of the things he would say made me actually laugh out loud. And there were some good things that happened in Another 40 Hours, but I felt like Another 40 Hours is kind of like, it's a clip. It's it's more of an action movie. And there's a few things thrown in here for little laughs here and there, but I found it to be a little bit more of a serious film. So I actually laughed more, and whether I was intentionally to or not, at Beverly Hills Cop 2 than I did in Another 40 Hours. But like I said, by a hair or two. Maybe because of the dick itch thing. Obviously it stood out for me, so that's where I'm going with. If your dick itches and you say it out loud, I'll give you the nod. And so Beverly Hills Cop 2, for having an itchy dick, I give you the nod for funniest.
Right, yeah. Now I'm thinking about it. I think I'm going to go with Beverly Hills Cop 2 as well, because Beverly Hills Cop 2 is a comedy. See, this is the thing. In Another 48 Hours, there's humor, but in Beverly Hills Cop 2, there's comedy, and Eddie Murphy is funny. He is, I think we've dissed him a lot on.
Well, it's during the time of when he was doing that, it worked for him. That was his shtick. Over time, if you've been around Eddie, if you've been around Eddie Murphy's work long enough, it gets old after a while. You get tired of some of that. So I'm not saying it wasn't good in the days. It's just after a while, it just grates on you.
Yeah,
like, okay, I get it.
Yeah, so I think there's some funny stuff. I mean, even on a subtle note, just like when they're all singing the dating game theme, and there's little. It's actually not necessarily huge laughs, but there is more comedy, and he is good at that, So I'll go with you on that. I think Beverly Hills Cop 2's got the funnier moments.
Most original plot.
Now this one was a tough one. Our old more original plot or better plot or whatever you want to do with the plot. All right, we're talking about the plot. There was an air of something could have been something with Beverly Hills Cop 2, with the way they started. Like, there was a direction, like you said, that Tony Scott probably wanted to take some of this action in. But because no one knew which film they were filming, clearly no one talked before they went to pre-production, we get this discombobulated film that is just basically a tired rehash of the first, not even as good, where at least in Another 48 Hours, which is where I'm going for this one, it was a continuation of the first movie that kept us, we now have the bookend. Like, so, sure, if you want to watch 48 Hours and never see another one, you're fine. It's good to go. But if you want to see what does happen 7 years down the road to the two characters, you get a really good story. It makes sense why they're together. You believe that at least that there's something happening. They at least have these threads that tie together, and you go, okay, this makes sense why this is now happening. And so for that, at least I was able to follow the story, knew why I was watching what I was watching, as opposed to this like convoluted thing like, well, we got to get Eddie Murphy's character out to Beverly Hills. How do we do that? I don't know. Let's make something up. And not even a good makeup. I mean, there's 1,000 ways you could have got him out there, and they found the worst way. I mean, how about this? He went on vacation. They could have at least done that. That would have made more sense. Right? Like, hey, you're too involved in this investigation. You got 2 weeks off. Go somewhere. And he's like, fuck it, I'll go out to Beverly Hills, see what's happening to my friends.
And then something happens
there. That would make more sense, right? That would make more sense than what happened. Exactly.
Like, if it had been there anyway, and this shit happened.
Yes, then you could be like, okay, and he fell into this.
Yeah, like the catalyst for him getting out there is weak as fuck.
Yeah. So that's why, for me, Another 48 Hours. For you, sir.
You said it, really, in a nutshell. It's a bookend. It continues the story, and, as a happy ending, like I say, although Eddie Murphy gets shot and carted away in ambulance at the end.
But he gets his money.
With
he gets his
500 grand.
Yeah, exactly.
So he doubles his money, I think. Beverly Hills Cop 2 has a very weak plot, and I think Another 48 Hours isn't Einstein, but they were smart enough to not just, make some new plot. In fact, that probably wouldn't have worked at all if they had to just come up with a new plot. They were smart enough to be traditional and continue it and use the same characters. So I think, as basic as that plot is, it works, it makes sense, and it's quite satisfying, really. Whenever I do watch Another 48 Hours, which is rare, I always feel comfortable with it. I always feel like, well, I've seen 48 Hours 30 times maybe in my life. I've seen Another 48 Hours like 3 times, so I'm not like, let's not get too carried away. I think of its kind, 48 Hours is a masterpiece. I don't think that of Another 48 Hours, but it'll do.
Yes. There are worse things you could watch on a Sunday afternoon.
There are worse. Yes. So for me, definitely Another 48 Hours.
Best Action Hero.
Now, Best Action Star. This one, I'm going to give it to Beverly Hills Cop 2 because Axel Foley's the action star. The other one's a buddy cop, and not really, honestly, if you look at Reggie Hammond, he's not exactly doing a lot of action. He's trying to, keep himself alive, and when he has to do action, he does. And I wouldn't necessarily say Nick Nolte's out there doing action left, right, and center either. It's a cop procedural kind of thing. And in this one, you get Axel Foley doing some stuff, some speeding, some driving, some shooting. Your standard action comedy. He's the guy that we're there for. He's the centerpiece of that film. There's a lot of stuff going on in the other one. So for that alone, I got to give Mr. Axel Foley some credit. He at least, look, again, these are action comedies. This isn't Martin Riggs. This isn't fucking John McClane. All right. This isn't Dutch. All right. Look, understand what we're talking about here. We're in a certain genre. We're not expecting them to be shooting 30 guys, in a row. But when there is some action called on, Axel Foley's there up to the task, and to me, he's the action star. How about for you?
No, I'd agree with that. I would say it's Eddie Murphy we're talking about here, and he doesn't want any action. The only action he wants is some pussy in another 4 hours. Or some Mugambo, as he called it, I think. Some trim.
Some trim.
Reggie Hammond doesn't want to get involved in any of this shit. So he spends the movie trying to avoid action, whereas Axel Foley's a bit more gung-ho and throws himself into it. So you'd have to give it to Axel Foley. Beverly Hills Cop 2, yeah.
The better movie.
All right, now the better movie, I think this is pretty, I'll be honest, going into it, I thought it was going to be Beverly Hills Cop 2. It's been a while since I've seen either of them. So I thought, Beverly Hills Cop 2 is the one I've always heard about more, in conversation. But it's another 48 hours. Another 48 hours, from top to bottom, is the better movie. It's more succinct. Oh, look, are there flaws? 100%. But this is a 1990s movie. But overall, I really enjoyed it. I actually enjoyed watching it. I was glad I did. And if I'd known I was going to like it, I probably would have done a back-to-back of 40 hours into another 40 hours. And I'd have been like, that's a pretty good evening.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
for me, another 40 hours is definitely the better movie. And it's really not close. And it hurts me to say that because that means Walter Hill, once again, will have won twice. Tony Scott's lost twice. We haven't put enough good Tony Scott movies in.
We should look into that.
We should, because Tony Scott's a damn good director of action.
Absolutely.
And unfortunately, just, not his fault for this one or the other ones. But, hey, unfortunately for me, I'm going to go with another 40 hours because Walter Hill, once again, did yourself.
Well, I sort of felt I had to tread carefully here because I love 48 hours so much. So, to give it to another 48 hours is what I mean. Would have felt
I know
a
what you mean.
bit.
Yeah, just like
I've got to be honest here. I saw Beverly Hills Cop 2 and another 48 hours. They're not films I've watched often, and my memory of them both was a bit hazy. So for once, I was, although I remember not liking Beverly Hills Cop 2 in the past, I didn't feel that strongly about another 48 hours either. I would never watch another 48 hours. I just wouldn't. I would always watch 48 hours, and maybe I'd do a double bill. Maybe. That's unlikely. But watching them close together and thinking about it, another 48 hours surprised me, actually. It's not without its flaws. It's not great. But in comparison, Beverly Hills Cop 2 was pretty fucking weak, actually.
Yeah, fortunately it is.
Especially when there's 2 to come after it as well.
Possibly 3.
That you know suck. So 3 and 4 suck. So you're sort of thinking, well, 2 can't be that bad. Kind of is. So yeah, for me, there's another 48 hours is the one.
And the winner is... Steve scores this showdown 42 in favor of another 48 hours, while Scott also scores at 42 in favor of another 48 hours. And the winner, by unanimous decision, is... another 48 hours.
All right, so there you have it. Another sequel showdown is in the motherfucking books. Be sure to check out our socials in the coming days for our monthly gourmet and horseshit recommendations, along with our latest inductees into our top 100 underrated films of all time. So from the Cheeky Bastards here at the Men of Action Podcast, have yourselves a happy Valentine's, and we'll see you next month.
Get the fuck out of here.
That will do it for another action-packed movie showdown. Now you can join in on the debate and let us know who you had as the winner of this month's head-to-head cinematic battle by following the show on all its socials. Those links can be found in our show notes. And be sure to join us again in 2 weeks for our latest episode of Dropping a Bruise, available, just like this podcast, exclusively on the last of the Action Heroes Podcast Network, where you can find other amazing shows dedicated to such iconic action stars as Stallone, Lundgren, Van Damme, Schwarzenegger, and Seagal. The link to the network can also be found in the show's notes. We hope you'll drop in again next month as we pit 2 action hero sequels against one another, as 2014's Taken 3 squares off against 2023's Equalizer 3 for sequel supremacy. So until then, stay explosive, my friends.
This has been a Man with an Exceptional Beard production.